Hello, my name is Stephanie Flamik, and this is my heroic imagination project. So, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what it means to be a hero, first by looking at Philip Zimbardo's definition of it, and then some statistics from his study um, about what kind of people qualify as a hero. And then I'm going to be looking at some steps I think it takes to put that into action and be a hero. And along the way, I'll be talking about the implications in my life. And at the end, I'll be talking about how you can apply it to your life. So, for a little introduction, I liked the quote, "All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." We can include women in that as well. Um, Basically, I liked this quote because it kind of has to do with Lombardo's definition that when people, other people are being passive or stepping aside, is when you step up and you become the hero. And if no one does that, that's when evil triumphs. So, looking at what is a hero and heroic imagination. So, in 2008 TED Talk, Zimbardo defined heroism as taking the personal risk for the common good while others remain passive. So, how I relate this to my own life is in my job. I work with kids on the spectrum at a kids' gym, but we're a gym for all kids. So a big goal of ours is inclusivity. Um, so I have a knack for working with these kids with disabilities and typically developing kids. And um, the common good that we're looking at here is making kids feel comfortable and safe in a space with others. Um, because we hear from a lot of parents that they don't get that a lot outside of there or outside of the home. So we want to make sure these kids can interact with each other well and have a safe space for their sensory and processing needs. Um, so this isn't a job that everyone can do. So I felt kind of a calling for it, and um, I feel that it, somewhat makes me a hero by this definition. Um, so then heroic imagination, according to Zimbardo and Franco, is the capacity to imagine facing physically or socially risky situations, to struggle with the hypothetical problems these situations generate, and to consider one's actions and the consequences. So the risk that comes along with this um, might be that parents don't always want you kind of raising their children or teaching their children, since we're not technically a school. Um, so there's always somewhat a risk that comes along with trying to teach these children to interact with one another. But it usually ends up turning out well. So it's a risk I'm willing to take. Um, so then looking at some statistics from Zimbardo's same TED Talk, they did a national probability sample of 4,000 Americans and found that opportunity matters. So they related this to urban situations versus rural or suburban situations. So a hero is more likely to be found in an urban setting because there's more people, more stuff happens there. And education matters as well. Heroes are more likely to have higher education, and volunteering matters. So in my case, I started out as a volunteer at my job, and it kind of helped me build this empathy. And I realized that I had kind of a knack for working with these kids. And even though I got all my volunteer hours, it made me want to come back. Um, and especially with my education being a focus in teaching in education and in pre-occupational therapy, I was learning a lot in my classes about, I had to take SPED, so I had to learn about kids with disabilities and just kids' brains in general and how they grow. So that education helped me. And then Cincinnati is obviously more of an urban setting than other places. And then Zimbardo also mentioned surviving disaster and trauma impact. Um, so in my case, I have a sister with autism who's on the spectrum, and that has kind of impacted how I have learned how to, make her feel comfortable in certain situations, and that helps with my job and my impact there. So then looking at some steps to becoming a hero and strengthen her imagination. So one is to be vigilant of situations that may require heroic action. So sometimes I notice, arguments between kids at my job. Um, Maybe some of them are on the spectrum and the other isn't. Um, and so I kind of know, when it's maybe my time to step in, um, because the kids can't always solve these conflicts by themselves. Um, and then number two, do not live in fear of conflict. Stick to your principles. If I was afraid of conflict happening at my work, whether it's internal with the kids and themselves or their surroundings or with each other, or even with parents, if I was afraid of that, I wouldn't be able to, give these kids the experience that they need, and deserve. So I always have to kind of stick to my guns when it comes to that, and it usually ends up turning out well. And number three, consider long-term effects. What I mean by this is people tend to think about what makes me feel comfortable in this situation right now. But sometimes you have to think about the common good and how it may affect you know their the kids' lives to come in my situation, how it may affect their lives in the future if I teach them this right now, or help them through this right now, instead of just being like, oh, I don't want to deal with that right now, and just looking at short-term effects. So consider long-term effects in being a hero, and then resist the urge to rationalize inaction. So we tend to rationalize like, oh, I don't need to step in for this reason or that, but why not give it a go? Why not see what you can do, especially if you think something is wrong? So for some real world implications and how this may, impact your life, um, you can look at heroic action in work, as I mentioned. Even if your work itself doesn't always seem heroic, there are always opportunities to help others. Like if someone needs, support going to their boss about something, or you're being treated unfairly, that can be heroic action. And then at home life, whether you're living with roommates, family members, or pets, these can require heroic actions. Kind of thinking of some examples of those, solving conflicts, or maybe stepping up when your roommate or family member needs something. And then in school, if you're taking classes or teaching them, are you making sure you're taking risks for the greater good and maybe trying new things to make sure your students or yourself is getting the education that you need? And then in the public, everyone is fighting a battle that you don't know anything about. Keep that in mind when you're looking at taking heroic action. And then online is a big situation as well. Nowadays, evil tends to hide behind a screen. So maybe looking at how you can impact others online as well. So in conclusion, the right way to be heroic is a case-by-case decision. There's many situations that this can arise in, but if you keep in mind the definitions and action steps we talked about today, that can help you and I make a better society. Thank you.